welcome you to this process. We look forward to hearing from you. And questions are general. I got you some questions. First question is, we've read your resume. We know something about you. Is there something that you would like to tell us that's not on your resume?
Well, first, I would like to thank the board for allowing me the opportunity to come before you today. Just being one of the 5 finalists is already a great achievement, so thank you. You know, it's difficult to know a person from 2 sheets of paper. So in that document, you will not know that I am someone that can work with someone that doesn't like me as easily as I can with someone that loves me. I'm not going to, we've got to be honest, I know you've received phone calls, emails, sometimes even some visits from people that feel like I'm not a good fit with Bullitt County schools, but many of those people have never had the chance to meet me. They've developed a perspective of me that is from Facebook or what someone has told them, but those people are more welcome to come to my office just as anyone else. We have to come together regardless of our viewpoints, because the main goal is to service the students, families, and staff of Bullitt County. The other thing that you won't know about me, that you won't find on that paper, is that there's no task too small that I want to do. I've climbed onto the roof of a school building to watch the HVAC units be installed. I have taken out trash in 4-inch heels in schools when our custodians were not able to be there. I have cleaned restrooms. So there's no task. I have fed students on the cafeteria line, and I've done my best to help troubleshoot with technology. I'm not very good at it, but I've learned that if you turn it on and turn it off, then turn it back on again. So I am not one to shy away from what needs to be done, no matter the task. If I'm going to ask someone else to do it, I'm also going to do it myself. The last thing that I'm going to share with you is I don't like to make assumptions about people. I like to get to know people for who they are. I think assumptions cause us more division. We have enough division as it already is. When there's division, it's difficult to have growth. So again, most importantly for me is bringing together everyone, being open, honest, and inviting them in, and just being approachable. Those are the things that you won't find on that document.
What will you do to create an atmosphere in the schools that will lead to educational excellence for all students?
The atmosphere for educational excellence is large. It takes a lot of components to do that, but we have to celebrate even the smallest achievements. You know, we spend a lot of time looking at our students that have made 30 and above on the ACT, those students who are AB students. But sometimes we forget about that pocket of children that are doing well at the level they are working in. I spend a lot of time in the CBC classroom. Some of those students are working on basic math, multiplication, but they're doing well. They're working above their ability. I celebrate those achievements because they've come from one place and they've made so many great gains. When you think about it as a race, they may not be able to finish that race. They're not making it to the finish line, but they're inching closer and closer and closer. To have a culture of academic excellence, you also have to have high expectations, not just of the students, but of the staff, the faculty, myself, and the parents. You know, I hold myself to a high standard, but I have to also remind myself that it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be easy. And I think you develop that culture in letting people know we're going to make some falls, but we're going to get back up and continue to make those gains. That's how we develop that culture of excellence.
What do you consider to be the major strength that you would bring to this position?
So, one of the strengths, and it's taken me a while to learn this, one of my strengths is that, and people who know me, there could be an angry giant to walk into my office, screaming and yelling, very upset. But as I listen to their concerns, their questions, I'll ask them to come have a seat in my office, and let's discuss how I can help you with those things, those concerns that you have. Some people may call that fearlessness, but my greatest strength is selflessness. I shift my focus from the anger that people may have for me, because we as teachers want parents and guardians to advocate for their children, but we get upset when they come through our doors cursing and screaming at us. We got to remember that those parents are still advocating for their children. It may not be in the manner that we want, but they're there, they're being present, they have those questions, they're making connection. So my greatest strength is selflessness. I have shifted that focus from me to what the main goal is, to the why that I would be if I'm placed in this position. And the why, again, is centered on student achievement and helping the teachers, staff, the faculty, and advancing learning for all students in Blount County.
Good morning, Dr. Prigmore.
Good morning.
Criterion 1 has exceptional listening skills with a commitment to accessibility and an open door policy. Question number 1. What evidence can you cite to show that you are a good listener?
I like to talk to people, and when I'm speaking to someone, I want them to feel that they are the only person on the face of this world. I want them to know that I'm attentive to them, I care about their concerns. You know, we walk around sometimes with a cell phone on our hip or in our hands, and when I leave my cell phone at home, I don't feel complete. But if my cell phone rings or buzzes when I'm speaking to someone, I don't answer it unless they let me know that it's okay. I'll stop the conversation and I'll say, do you mind if I answer? And then I will go back to them because I don't want them to think I'm not interested. I'm not interested in what they have to say to me. I always look at my body language. I also look at their body language because sometimes body language can speak louder than verbal. I know there was an incident where I was speaking with a teacher and something was just off. And at that time, she didn't feel comfortable sharing with me, but I went back to her. I made another connection with her, closed her classroom door and said, are you okay? That's how listening works. Sometimes they don't even have to say anything to you to let you know that there is a problem. I follow up with people after I talk with them. Did I feel the need that you have? How can I be of further assistance to you? So there's a lot of different things that I use as strategies to be a good listener, but the most important is letting them know that I am concerned about their concerns and that they always can come to me at any time and in any moment.
Question number 2. Give us an example of when you've changed your mind and taken a different course of action as a result of listening to others.
This one was an easy one for me to get an answer. When I worked at the middle school, and educators will know how frustrating this will be. We had 4 different schedules. Every grade had a different schedule. So as an administrator and the RTI coordinator, it was very challenging for me to hold tier 2 and tier 3 interventions and pull all the kids because each and every one of them were on different schedules. We also had problems with pulling our ELL students and our students that needed assistance for special education. But when I wanted to change that and went to the principal of the school, I heard what the teacher said. We need time to come together as a grade level. We need that collaborative time, not just for ourselves and to help build more strategies for academic achievement, but because we need to make cross-curricular connections with one another. And then we also just need time to come together. We need time to vent. We need time to share what's happening in our personal and our professional lives. So once I heard that, I was like, okay, we'll keep this burden. I'll be the one that's frustrated and I'll allow that to happen to you because we need to remember is that our teachers are dealing with more than just what's going on at school. They need that time to come together and share with one another. They need that time to know and to refresh, to rejuvenate.
Question number 3. In your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees, students, parents, and the community? How would you plan to have time available for all involved?
So I think we need to take every opportunity we can to allow people to come to us and to communicate with one another. When I was the director of alternative learning at Pershing Academy, I used to give parent surveys. I gave teachers surveys. The teacher at the building, he also had the opportunity to tell me and give me his feedback on what I was doing. I always ask the parents, how can I make this process easier for you? Because if you don't know, it's very hard to know and have your child placed at alternative school. So I wanted to transition and make that transition a lot easier for them. I have an example for you. Tuesday, this past Tuesday was the district track and field meet at William Blount High School. My daughter was participating and I knew I needed to leave at 4:30 to beat the traffic and get out there all the way from Alcoa Central Office to William Blount High School. Well, guess what? My phone rang. I could have easily just walked out that door. But it would have bothered me because I would have been thinking, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? Did something happen? Did someone leave me? Do I need to do this, that? So I decided to answer that telephone call. I sat there, I listened to the concerns of that parent. I gave them the information that they needed. It took only about 5 minutes, but that was an easy, quick 5 minutes of my time. Now, you may say, as a mother, aren't you interfering with the time of your children? No, I'm being an example to my children. My children know that I love them, and I made it on time to that track meet before she started throwing. But I have to be an example and let them know there are some things, there are some sacrifices that we're going to have to make. But you have the support of myself, my family, and my friends. So I have to give what I can to the parents and families and staff as well.
Thank you.
Criterion 2, has the ability to unify diverse groups and build and maintain high morale among employees. Question 1, how can you bring together a diverse, talented group of individuals to form an effective team?
So to me, diverse means different perspectives, different viewpoints, different ideas on how to get to the targeted goal. But what I've done is I've reminded people about the why we are here. We sit down and listen to all of those different perspectives, viewpoints, and suggestions, and we know that we have very strong ideas on what should be done, but we have to come to some sort of agreement. So I sit down and I remind them about the why. It's about the student, and then we discuss the most effective, efficient way of getting student achievement to increase. So when I have a meeting, though, and bring people together, it's important for me to prepare an agenda. Because if you don't know teachers, it's easy for us to get off task and start talking about other things that are not important or things that are not related to the task at hand. We sit down, we look at the agenda, we keep on those agenda points, but then I also have to allow an opportunity for people to give feedback on what they feel we've discussed. Is it important? Are we going to be able to have data to back that up? Are we going to have the resources that we need in order to move and advance in the direction that we want to go? So when we bring around a diverse group of people, I also like the fact that other ideas come up that we didn't even think about. So it is very effective and efficient in having different groups of people instead of like-minded people. Although like-minded people is good to have as well, but having those different perspectives and viewpoints may end up changing the way we look at things. So that's why it's important for me to bring together different people, including students and parents.
Number 2, describe a situation related to your current job that demonstrates your ability to inspire and motivate people.
As the director of attendance, it was very challenging to motivate some students. It was very challenging for me to convey to them the importance of their education and how it would impact them after high school. So what I did is I sat down with them, I talked to them, talked about their wants, talked about their needs. A lot of them, well, I want to be a rapper. Well, if you're going to be a rapper, you're going to be a businessman. So to be a businessman, let's get this math course done. To be a businessman, let's be able to talk to diverse groups of people. We have to be like chameleons. And I taught them, you can't talk certain ways with certain groups of people. So I motivated them because I tried to give them a different viewpoint. I know you want to be a rapper, but there's so much more that has to do with that. Let's research it. What do you have to do to get a music degree? Let's go that direction. Now let's look at the ACT. This school requires a 24 on the ACT, but we've got to get your science area improved. So this is how we're going to do it. So I want to call it kind of a manipulating type of situation to try to get them to understand it. But I had to bring it down and break it down to them in their language on the hows to get to where they wanted to be. I also reminded those students they needed to stay motivated because walking across that stage at graduation is not just for them. It is for their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, brothers, and their grandparents. So a lot of times I said, let's just get through today and see what happens tomorrow. And so for me, motivation was most challenging with students. With teachers, it's just a little bit easier. I let them know they're not alone. You are not alone in this journey. You are not on an island alone. I'm with you, and we will walk together. I celebrate what they are achieving. I celebrate how they are advancing our students, but I'm very honest with them on the areas that we need to improve. But the way I let them know is loving and it is here. So that's how I'm going to do it.
Cite an example of what you've done to build and maintain high morale among staff.
I don't know if any of you have ever had to present test scores to teachers, but I have. And when you present test scores to teachers and they're looking at it and they see the level, the number of students performing below grade level, it is like getting punched in the face. And I can see that these teachers gave everything that they can in the classroom, and still those few students were not able to meet that achievement. Did they meet growth? Yes, they did. But that achievement indicator, we're still just a few points behind that. That's when I referenced before, you are not on an island alone. Let's look at the different components in which that student was lacking. If we work on this, that may bump them up to here. So those are some of the things that I have to maintain that high morale, because it's easy for us to get down on ourselves because we've given blood, sweat, and tears in that classroom. And still our students were not able to perform at the state mandated level. When I do walkthroughs at the elementary school, which I must say I really enjoy, after I do my walkthrough and talk with the teacher, I get a follow-up email, and at the end of that email I say, keep doing what you're doing because you do it so well. And sometimes a lot of those teachers don't get that. They don't get that you're doing a good job. Administrators and principals, I know when a principal used to visit my classroom, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do this time? You know, oh my goodness, what parent has called? I didn't do it. You know, I'm the first one to say that. I like to make those visits and let the teachers know that they're doing good. When I speak at parent meetings at school, especially during COVID, I told those parents, don't forget about your teachers. Let them know they're doing a great job. They are hurting, they are suffering, and we are trying to build an entire virtual platform within months so that we can educate children across the state of Tennessee. And I'm going to give ourselves a pat on the back because I think we did a pretty good job. You know, some people say that COVID, you know, it really was negative for our school system, but it gave us an opportunity to learn different ways of doing things. We were sending food to communities. Parents were able to come in. It brought us closer together as a staff. But in all that time, I needed to remember to make sure that I thank those teachers for coming out to do those things. A simple thank you goes a long way. I check in on people. I always remind them that I'm here as a resource. Let me know what I can do for you. Call me, text me, email me. It doesn't matter. I always have an open door policy in my career, every time.
This criterion has to do with speaks and writes effectively to communicate the success as well as the needs of the school system. What evidence can you cite to demonstrate you are an effective communicator?
People who know me know that I am Black for life. Gray causes confusion. But as I'm speaking to someone, even though I say I'm Black and white, I'm very intentional about looking at the way I deliver my message. My intent may not always be received in the manner that I wanted it to be. So I always give follow-up questions to people to make sure that I understand their needs and that they understand how I'm going to help them resolve those needs, or that they understand the resources that I'm going to give to them that they need to actually go and tap into. I also regularly reflect on myself. I look at my body language because sometimes I have this habit of thinking and I'll you know, furrow my little eyebrow, and sometimes people are like, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm just thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner tonight, you know? It's nothing like that. So I've learned that I have to soften my face because I don't want people to think that I'm not approachable. I want them to be able to come up to me at any time, at any manner. You know, so those are the ways that I ensure that I'm an effective communicator.
Thank you. What have you done to help the public understand the needs and success of your school system?
So if you all would think back to when the whole Common Core and all of the new ways of teaching came out, we had a lot of parents that were concerned that they weren't going to be able to help their children learn math in the new way. So I started hosting what I call Tornado Universities. And Tornado University was held after school for parents to come to, for me to sit and explain to them the different skills. You know, we're going to do pictures, we're going to write it out, we're going to connect it. We can put this particular concept in, and we can describe how we came to this solution. At those Tornado Universities, I also gave those parents standards, a whole packet of standards for their grade level for that child, so they would know what they would be learning, what they would need to teach. I always am willing to speak with organizations. Again, like I had mentioned before, I love to speak in front of everyone, so I go to schools, to different schools and speak to them. Even this school year, I was able to do diversity training throughout our district. I also invite groups to come to our school. I ask people to let me come to their organization so that I can discuss and talk about the successes of our school, because that's another way that we can build morale. Talk about the successes. Invite the newspaper. Put it on our Facebook page. Put it on our Twitter page and our district page. We got to scream it as loudly as we can, because what we do and how we show others will encourage community organizations to build relationships with us. And ultimately, those resources will be used in the classroom and throughout the district.
Thank you.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
I'm trying to lean over to this mic because we figured out earlier in the week that that one doesn't work very well. So I apologize. I look like I'm trying to lay down here.
You are just fine.
Criterion number 4, foster support, confidence, and pride within the community for the school system through timely information sharing and providing meaningful opportunities to be involved. Now, and we also realize over the course of this interview, some of these questions overlap, so forgive us.
That's okay.
Number 1, what have you done to create excitement and to generate support for public schools?
Again, no matter the audience, I'm going to speak up. There are things that are going on in public education that teachers need assistance with, things that need to be revamped, adjusted, so that we can be more of a service to students. I've spoken with state legislators, I've spoken with city officials, letting them know that we need more funding, and how can we do that? You know, our director right now works very diligently with our city officials to try to garner more funding for our school system. But it's important to find ways to make connections so that we can address those needs. You know, we receive a lot of money, BEP money, but it's for a basic education. And there's no school in Blount County area that gives a basic education. I'm glad to see that they're revamping it to the TEALs, but until we get to that school year, we have to work with the money and the funds that we have. So I don't hesitate to talk to Mr. Ramsey as he's pulling his cart down the parade at Christmas time, and then get a piece of candy as well. So I'm going to speak to anybody and everybody, parents, guardians, even the board, city officials. And like I said before, I will speak to an angry giant, so a state legislator is not going to be a hard person to speak with for me. As far as excitement, I was so glad to participate this last school year at the intermediate school. The excitement that I wanted to gain was for the kids. The parents were excited to drive up and toss their children out of the car. But I wanted that excitement back for the children. So again, in my 4-inch heels and my nice suits, I was out there doing the Cupid shuffle. We were dancing, we were having fun, we were giving high fives and then checking their foreheads, making sure their temperature was at a certain level. But we had that excitement. Whenever I get a chance, I'll go up to a teacher, say a silly joke, make a little noise or anything, just to get a smile, to bring that joy back to the classroom that we once had. And it's coming back. It is coming back, but there's so many compliance and state mandates and things that we are bound to that start to bog us down. So I'll be silly. I'll do a dance anywhere I can to make somebody happy, to make somebody smile. Those are the ways that I bring that excitement to the children.
And question number 2, how have you worked within a community to generate support for the school system?
I am very active in my community. I think it is a duty to be active in your community, to be visible in your community. Right now, I work with the Lions Club. The Lions Club comes in and they do vision screenings for us. I work with Kroger. They provide a clinic on site at the school for our teachers to go to, pneumonia, shingles, anything, so that they don't have to take that time to go outside. They can just have it done right inside of the school. I've worked with the fire department, have them come in and help me with BMI screenings. Our Blount County Health Department has so many resources, and they are so willing to come to the schools and provide nutrition, education. I know COVID has paused that a little bit, but I'm sure that those type of efforts are going to help again. I've worked with the Kiwanis Club. You know, we have a very sweet friend of mine who's coming in, and he is a mentor at the elementary school. He called me up and he said, is this a service that may be needed? We always can have mentors. So he comes into the elementary school and has lunch with one of the students. Another organization called Men in Christ. They honor those students and recognize those students that are making great academic achievements in school. And not necessarily are these students the ones that are top A/B students all the time, but they are students that have shown growth. They give gift cards to those students and have a small banquet, have had small banquets for them as well. Most importantly, I work with Family Promise. We have to realize that COVID has caused many of our students and families to experience homelessness, and we need to do what we can to make sure that they have the needs, that the basic needs that's required for them to be successful. So I work with them, and of course we have a fabulous resource director that we also work with. So those are just a few of the community organizations that I use to generate support for our schools.
Question number 3. We expect our director of schools to be active and visible in our community. How would you go about accomplishing this in Blount County?
So I've been a resident of Blount County for 47 years. This is my home today, and it will be my home tomorrow. I don't ever see myself leaving. So not only will I attend after-school sports events, musical events, those type of things, but I will continue to be present at other community organizations. I won't hesitate to visit churches. You know, when you get the support of a church, you have a great support. Some of our churches come in and provide lunches for our teachers. So I want to make those connections with everybody, even our faith-based organizations. It's important to me. I'll continue to help with the areas that I'm already serving with, like with the Blood Memorial Hospital Foundation. A few weeks ago, I was able to help them at we were at the Chilhowie Sportsman Club, and I had the opportunity to go clay shooting for the first time. But their services provide medical needs to people who are not able to afford it. Their services have also provided vaccinations and funds to families and students of alcoholists in schools. So I'm definitely going to continue those connections and that involvement with people. I don't like to sit at my desk. I like to be at the schools. I want to be there helping them, doing what I can. I have sat down on an elementary school floor and played with children in a full suit and heels. That is what's important to me. That's how you're visible. Being out and about, and behind a closed door, that's not my style. That doesn't benefit me. That doesn't bring me joy. Bring me joy is walking through a door and having people say, good morning, Dr. Prigmore. Hello, Dr. Prigmore. What brings me joy is having students that I taught 10 years ago come back to my office and say, I love you for what you did for me. When I worked at Heritage Middle School all those years ago, there was one student, and I thought he just did not like me. I didn't know how to make a connection or anything. About 3 years ago, he sent me a message on Facebook. And he said, oh my gosh, you are doing such a great job. I'm glad that we're connected again. I even messaged him back. I said, I thought you didn't like me. And he said, no, you are one of my favorite students. We never know the impact that we have on any person at any given time. So I will definitely be a visible person in each and every school throughout the school.
Dr. Prigmore, my questions are about planning and strategy. What? Oh, thank you.
I'm always
You're not
nagging.
used to hearing that from him, are
From
you?
him, no.
It's usually me.
So we're going to move into planning and strategic activity. So criterion 5 says we want to know about your experience in working with students, parents, staff, the community, and the school board to develop long-range goals and strategies for the school system and the determination and ability to accomplish those goals. So question number 1 is, how have you used planning and goal setting to improve your school or school system?
So whenever I start planning, I like to use the SMART goals. SMART goals is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I think all of those components are very important to focus in on your strategies and what's needed in order to gain or meet the target goals that you have set. Most importantly, I like the time bound, because as I'm setting a goal, I'm going to say by the end of, or by May, such and such, I would like for 5% of the students, however it's going to be done. And I can track whether or not I'm heading towards that. I can look at the data and see if my data is trending towards that goal by May. So that allows me to make adjustments, not just me, but our team to make adjustments if needed. We're going to keep those strategies if we see that we're making progress. We're going to change those strategies. I tell you, it's very helpful in the RTI process and try to get those students that are below grade level up to meeting that expectation. Because we can look at those interventions and the achievement data that we get from those interventions and see if those students are trending in the right direction. That lets us know, what do we need to change? How can we focus in on those skills? Which skills do we need to focus in on? So whenever we're doing planning to try to improve our school or our school system, I use the SMART goals with the team. And because it brings us good data and it lets us show the progress that we're making towards the targeted goals.
Thank you. And how did you obtain the support of the students, parents, staff, community, and the school board in the development and implementation of those plans?
So when I read that question, the last 2 words are your plan. So the first thing that I said, it's not my plan. I don't think your plan will be successful in the district if we look at it as my plan. It's our plan. So in order for our plan to be successful, to get that support, I have to involve everyone. You know, my children, they get these expensive things and that I've paid for, and then I see it on the floor and I'm like, oh my goodness, or there's Coke on top of the PS4 and I'm like, that's gonna mess up. But if it messes up, guess what? You'll buy it. And I bet if you buy it, you'll be invested in it and you'll take care of it. I need for all the stakeholders to feel invested in our district initiatives. They need to have a say in the goals because they know their children. They know this community. They know what is best for their children in their household. But we need to bring that together because what's best in one household is not necessarily best in another household. So that's why it's important that this is our plan. And it won't be successful until it's inclusive of everyone. Again, I get everybody's input. And I encourage them to come to me, ask how it's going. Transparency is important. But not only must you be transparent, you must take the responsibility when we're not making those gains. Let's sit down and say, oh, we're not doing good right here. But then we need to come together and get an understanding on what we can do to make those improvements and continue to meet those expectations.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a break. I encourage you to meet all these fine people. Most of them look like probably your family, but check them out. Are you ready?
I am ready.
I'll pull my mic down, Debbie.
Where's Wade? Where's John? Oh, okay. I was like, wait, I don't see John.
Okay, criteria 6, has the wisdom to know when change is necessary and the ability and determination to generate such change, even in the face of opposition. Number 1, describe a significant change you initiated in your district or school and tell us what evidence you have to show it was a positive change. How did you build support for that change, even in the face of opposition?
So last school year, my director asked me to take on the task of being the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee person. And I decided to take on that task. Even though I knew some of our coworkers, every time they hear the word diversity, you kind of see a rolling of the eyes. It always surprises me that in my community right now, and I'm not just speaking about Alcoa City, I'm talking about Blount County as a whole. We always want to talk about how we love people, but we don't want to talk about diversity. And so I wanted to listen to the needs. I brought together a committee, someone from each of the schools, brought together a committee and asked them, what do we need to do? What do we need to discuss? And let's be very open-minded that some of our coworkers are not necessarily going to want to hear about more diversity. So what we decided is that we would build upon what we had already learned through Reverend Lewis, who talked about biases. But I wanted to give them something that they could take back and not only use it in their classroom, but use it in their life. So as I mentioned before, I went throughout the district and I did a training on microaggressions. And that particular training was focused on our intentions versus our impact. The focus was us. And the focus was also that we have all committed these microaggressions. It is not for a specific race or gender. Each and every one of us have committed those microaggressions. So when I went around through the district and I talked about your intent versus the impact it has, it made people realize, oh my goodness, I've done this before. I had specific examples up there. I gave them a quiz and I said, how did this make you feel? We talked about different situations and scenarios, and it really opened people's minds. We had great, effective discussions around this. And in order to make sure that I was providing them with relevant professional development, because we've got to remember our teachers are doing a lot of professional development. I've only been in this career for 20 years, but I feel like what I learned when I first came in has been called something different, and now we're having professional development on the same thing. So I wanted to give them something relevant that they could take to the classroom, that they could take outside of their classroom. So I sent out a survey. I got such great feedback from those teachers. I even had one of the teachers contact me and say, I want to do this with my family. I want them to see this. I opened up their eyes to a different perspective on our personal actions and behaviors and how it may be hindering our relationship with students. And if we remember, our relationship with students, if it's not right, is going to hinder their achievement in the classroom. Our relationship with parents, if it's not right, is going to hinder their willingness to come and be involved and active in their child's learning. So even though I knew that diversity training would make some people's eyes roll, I had listened to what they had said before. We want relevant professional development. I geared it towards that direction and built upon what Reverend Lewis had already taught us. And it was an absolute success. And it was so successful that I'll be presenting this summer at the TVA conference, that same professional development.
How do you keep up with research and initiatives that may drive change?
I think it's important for not just administrators, but teachers and parents, community members, to stay abreast of those type of changes that are happening. So I'm always looking for professional development opportunities, especially those that are sponsored by our state. I attend the TDAS conference, which is for the Tennessee Data and Attendance Personnel. I've attended TASI, and I will continue to go back to TASI, which is a Tennessee Legislative Law Conference for Special Education. I attend Coordinated School Health Conference, which of course they bring out the health initiative for the whole child. I regularly visit the Tennessee General Assembly website. I need to know the bills that are about to pass through our legislation and how those bills are going to affect what we're doing in public education, how we need to make changes to adjust and ensure that we comply with those mandates. I collaborate with educators and administrators locally and across the state. I also look at the shifts in educational trends in other states. It's amazing how you see something that's happening in one state and you look at what is happening and you think to yourself, it's going to make its way to Tennessee. So I stay abreast of all of those things, but most importantly, if we do not already, Blount County, and I'm sure you do, make contact with Chuck Cagle. He is an attorney that knows everything about education, and he keeps us informed of the bills coming through, whether it be bills about our budget or bills about what we must do in order to let the students know that they're able to vote. There's a lot of things going on in our state legislation about public education that the community has no idea. And when it comes down through the pipe, it is going to shift how we do things. And we have to be prepared to make those changes.
Okay, back to strategic planning. Criterion 7 has to do with your leadership with successful experience in strategic planning, instruction, and curriculum development. Question 1, tell us of 3 curricular or instructional improvements that occurred as a result of your leadership. What evidence do you have that they were improvements?
So when I thought about this question, there were 3 teachers that came to mind that I interacted with to help them improve their instruction. The first one was, I served as a mentor for a first-year teacher. And, you know, we go through college, we pay the student loans, but it's a lot like parenthood. You don't get that experience until you're actually going through with it. So this teacher came into the classroom and she was giving these great lessons and all of these activities, and I was looking at her lesson plan and I'm looking at what she's teaching, and I'm thinking to myself, it's not necessarily focusing in on the standard that you have as the expectation for learning. So we sat down and we were able to discuss. I helped her with other strategies and opportunities. I asked her, look at your questioning. Are your questioning strategies just assessing what the students know? Are they recall? Or are you developing questions that deepen the understanding? Do your questions make connections to prior knowledge? How can they use those questionings that you give to them and develop more deeper understanding? Make powerful connections to other content. Her feedback, what are we saying to the children once they give us their tasks, once they complete their assignment? Are we having what they previously had and comparing the two, asking them, tell me what you see you need to do. What do you need to improve on this? How can I help you to get to this place? What were you thinking when you chose this particular answer? So feedback is very important. Our feedback must reach beyond, good job. Keep up the good work. It's got to be effective, rich feedback given to each and every student. So that was the first one that helped her. I think it helped her. We're still friends today, but helped her instructional strategies in the classroom. A discussion about delivery. There was a teacher, a great teacher. He was a seasoned teacher, but his humor was not necessarily understood by the grade level that he had. And he didn't understand why the students just didn't get him. He didn't feel like he was making that connection with everybody. And the analogy that I gave him that I still use to this day, you can order the best pizza from Pizza Hut. But if the delivery man shakes it up and throws it about and then hands it to you, you're not going to want to eat that pizza. Your delivery means everything. So once I had that discussion with him, he didn't even realize how he was interacting with the students was causing a little bit of a rift, that it was not building that relationship, that genuine caring and wanting to come to him. He couldn't get students to come to him and ask him questions, and he wanted to improve that. So I took him to that particular place and had him ponder on the idea of maybe my humor is above their head. So he had to make a personal shift. And once he did that, things got better for him in his classroom. Another teacher was having a hard time trying to connect with a difficult student. It ended up being a bumping head situation. And I think for them, the instructional part of that was once they got through that tense situation, the fighting, not necessarily fighting, but I had to remind the teacher, this is a child who doesn't really understand the importance of his education. So if we just sit back, everything that we do with one student is not necessarily going to work with another student. And again, it goes back to taking the self out of the situation. You're here as the teacher. If they come in and have a bad day, we can't let their bad day seep into our day and cause it to be bad. You know, look at that child. You're having a bad day? Okay, go sit down for you. Take the time that you need. We can break the processes and the molds in order for a student to just go sit down and relax and have an opportunity to collect themselves instead of forcing them to sit in a seat and listen to us. We don't know what that student had done the night before. That's something else that I had to remind that teacher. We don't know if that child ate the night before. We don't know if their parents work third shift and they're the ones that's responsible for taking care of their children. So I had to open that particular teacher's mind up to the possibilities that were causing that child to act in a different way. And once he realized that, and once he decided to take himself out of it, that child wasn't attacking him. That child was reacting to some sort of trauma that they're experiencing outside of the classroom.
Thank you. Number 2, describe your involvement in the development of your school district strategic plan. How did you build support to accomplish the goals and objectives in the plan?
So as I've mentioned before, I was responsible for helping develop the school improvement plan at one of the schools that I worked at. In that particular plan, there are requirements, and I was very willing to do those requirements. You had to have student involvement, parent involvement, teacher involvement, community member involvement. So I always wanted to host meetings, but we tend to forget that our parents are working So having a meeting during the day, not all parents are going to be able to attend. I would have those meetings after school, and then, but when you think about it, if you have a meeting at 4 o'clock, a lot of parents are done at 5 or 6. So there were times that I spent late nights at the school having a meeting at 6 or 7 o'clock, providing food, because sometimes those parents were bringing little ones with them, and they were not able to feed them at that time. So I provided that food for them, just to encourage them to come. So those were one of the events that I hosted, but also reaching out, sending out surveys. I asked the teachers, what are the needs that you have for your classroom? Conduct a needs assessment. What resources do you need to have? And then we need to look at whether or not we have those resources to purchase those needs. When a teacher told me a program that they may have needed, I would look at what we already have and ask them, let's look at this. Will this fill the need instead of us paying for another resource that's only being used in one classroom? So we had to consolidate, we had to collaborate, and we had to discuss. And I did every opportunity to have meetings, open forums, and invite people in for those discussions.
And question 3, describe your experience in interpreting and applying relevant student assessment data.
So my interpretation of applying relevant student data, it's evolved over the years. You know, for me, if we look at a student that's doing well, we don't always look at the areas where they may need improvement. Just because our students are at or above grade level, at any given test the following year, they can drop. So what was important to me is to look at the different skills and where each of those students were performing and make sure that they were still maintaining that progress and not losing or regressing back to below proficiency. I think when we see students in the test scores and it says, oh, that student is at or above, we're great, we're cheering, we're excited about that, and we should be, but we want to keep them there as well as moving the others up. We focus on trying to move those children that are below expectation up, that we sometimes forget to keep those that are performing well up there as well. So we have to delve down deep into that data, look at the scale scores, look at iReady assessments, look at Ames Web assessments, make sure that our benchmarks are effective and efficient, and that we're using that data to teach the proper strategies to address the deficiencies of the skills that we're seeing in our tests.
Thank you.
Criterion number 8. This deals with your experience as a teacher who understands the day-to-day operations of the classroom and that you have sound knowledge of instruction, curriculum, and educational programs. Question number 1, discuss your level of expertise in elementary and/or secondary curriculum and instruction. Describe where you gained this experience.
So as a classroom teacher, we've looked at a lot of curriculum. And when it's time for adoption year, we always get an influx of all these textbooks and those type of things. I have looked through subject-specific curriculums, online curriculums, project-based curriculums, but in my experience in all of those curriculums, the first thing that I ask myself is, does this curriculum address the state standards that my students will be assessed on? You know, there's a lot of companies making a lot of money out there right now, and they are shopping these curriculums out to everybody, and they're professing that it's going to improve and increase test scores, and some of these schools are so desperate that they're trying to find any resource that they can, but they're wasting some of their money. So the first thing that I've learned is that I need to make sure that what is in this particular curriculum is going to address what our students will be tested on. I need to know, does this curriculum also have an assessment component that I can make sure what I'm teaching them is going to give me the right type of data? Will that data drill down to the specific skills? Is that data going to offer teachers extra strategies on how they can improve literacy skills and math computation skills? So the important thing to me is I'm glad you have that curriculum. I'm glad you're showing that to us. But if it's not meeting the needs of our school, and if it's not providing the resources we need to address the standards for the assessment, thank you for visiting and have a great day. So that's key for me. I want something that's relevant and important and useful. I don't want a curriculum that I use for 1 week and push off to the side. That's wasted money, and that's wasted time.
Question number 2. Describe your experience in developing, implementing, and/or evaluating an instructional program that has improved the educational achievement of students.
So again, at Alcoa Middle School, I was the RTI coordinator. So I spent a lot of times at data meetings, and we talked a lot about interventions. I conducted the Tier 3 process, and the Tier 3 process is the highest level of interventions before a student is referred to special education. Excuse me. But for me, those interventions need to be very efficient, rigorous, and they had to be relevant to the deficiencies of the students. So as I was looking at the interventions, what I would do is see how that child was progressing. And I would always mark at least 6 data points to see if there was an upward trajectory in how that student was performing. If I saw that the student wasn't performing, it wasn't necessarily that the curriculum wasn't correct. It might have been the way that it was delivered in the classroom or by myself. So we would keep on as long as we could, because we always have to remember there's going to be that implementation dip. Sometimes with change, you're going to have that little dip until you get it right, and then you use it, and then those improvements start to show. So I didn't want to fall victim to the implementation dip when it came to those interventions, but I didn't want to wait too long for the time to pass and that student not receive additional interventions that they needed. So that's when we look at the instructional programs, I was very adamant about watching to see if it was improving. And in a lot of cases, it was. We put those interventions, whether it be Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3, but those layers did improve that student's academic performance. And the goal was to lessen the amount of referrals that we had to special education. We want those students to be successful with the classroom modifications that we have. And I think that we did a good job in evaluating the effectiveness of those programs.
That was at Alcoa Middle.
Yes.
Criterion 9, seeks information and ideas relative to the problem, makes decisions that demonstrate fairness, impartial judgment, appropriate analysis, and sensitivity for those affected by the decisions. Question number 1, think of a problem brought to you recently. What was the problem and how did you handle it?
So in my current position, most of the problems that are brought to me are about attendance, truancy, and discipline. You know, it is very important for me to address make sure our chronic absenteeism stays at a particular level. And I've got to toot Stanford Vet's horn a little bit, because Lund County's chronic absenteeism is under 8%, and you all have 10,000 students compared to the small district that we have. But I wanted to take that off the plate of our school administrators and registrars. So one of the problems that was brought to me was a student that had just gone into MIA. The parents moved, they didn't contact us. There was no request of records from any other school. For me, it was important to find this child because this child was cognitively disabled. And he received so many different services, I wanted to make sure he was okay. So when that was brought to me, I did a little Facebook stalking with the mom. So I stalked that mom from Tennessee to Georgia to Alabama and then to Florida. I was determined to send her as many messages as I could, and I got a little bit of communication back from her, but when they finally ended up in Florida, I called the place that they were living, and I called the front desk of the hotel they were living in, and I said, you know, where does she work at? So they told me where she worked at. I contacted my school SRO, had that SRO contacted the law enforcement in that particular area, and they made a little visit at the school, at the place that she worked. Then I called the school where the student would be zoned at, and I said, you have a student out there that needs a lot of services, and I want to try to get him in school. Eventually, we received a records request for that student, and he is doing well. But that particular trouble, that particular problem, I didn't want the administrators of the school to deal with that. It took a long time for me to get that student enrolled into a different school. And our teachers, administrators, and our front office staff, they are dealing with enough. So it was nothing for me to say, I got it, and I'll take care of it.
Question number 2, tell us about the most important decision you've made in your last or current position. How did you involve the people who would be affected by that decision?
So the example I'm going to give you, I involved them after I made the decision. And I made this decision sitting at a truancy board hearing, and I'm sitting off to the side, and the assistant principals are listening to this particular grandmother speak. And this grandmother is in tears because she cannot get her grandson to get out of bed. And I'm looking at that young man's demeanor, and he's slouched in his seat and everything. And I hear one of my administrators say, "Ma'am, you're gonna have to take parenting classes." She's just told us how her husband has left her. She's had open heart surgery. She's taking care of her grandkids because her daughter is addicted to drugs and things. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not right. So out of nowhere, I was told, we're not going to do that. And I said, "Ma'am, you're not going to take those classes. I'm going to file a petition against your grandson. You are not the one that's responsible for this. You are taking the time to raise a child because of the situation you are having. You are having health problems. This is, and well, for me, it was the demeanor of the young man. So I looked directly at him and I said, this is your fault. So if you miss another day, I'm going to file a petition against you in juvenile court." Well, once they left, I had a discussion with the truancy board. I apologized for making that decision because it wasn't what was planned. They agreed with it. But I think we decided that we can't do a one-size-fits-all for every situation that comes across our desk. There are times where we have to break that mold because in any given situation, there are other factors that are involved. It was not fair nor godly for me to have that grandmother go through an 8-hour parenting class when she is giving everything to that child, and he was not respecting of her or the effort she was giving. So that's one of the things, the shifts and changes I made. I know it was on the back end, but I think it's a good way of just leading and learning in life, learning to make those quick judgments and shifts. Because first of all, I have a heart, and I have to go home, and I have to sleep well at night. So I know I asked them afterward, but I did apologize. So I didn't win.
Thank you.
This is number 10, criteria 10. This is the last one.
Yay!
Proven ability to develop and administer a comprehensive school budget, including allocation of resources, understanding federal, state, and local funding issues. Question 1. Explain how you would develop a school system budget and tell us who you would involve and how you would involve them.
Well, first I would need to get familiar with the current budget. Look at how money is allocated and the resources that we purchase in that budget that we have. I would definitely need to become more familiar with TISA, because we have to remember we're going to transition from BEP to TISA, and the whole components, a lot of the components have been removed. It has completely been revamped. So I would want to know, how much are we going to be allocated of that $9 billion that the state is trying to give to Tennessee schools? Once I learn all of that, of course I would bring together Mr. Logan, our CFO here, the federal programs director, the special education director, the school administrators, and of course you all. It's not just going to be one person with this budget, it's going to be collective. That also means we're going to have to include our city manager, our city politicians. Sit down, see where we have, what type of funding that we have, how much we're going to get, see how we can save money so that we can move more into, teacher salaries and resources that are needed for our students. Sometimes I look at a budget as a leaky faucet, and it drips, and it drips, and it drips. And what my experience has been, we spend a lot of money on resources that we can consolidate, and then we have another pocket of money that we could put somewhere else. So it would be definitely an ongoing task. Budget should be talked about all through the school year. Once you get that budget made for this school year, we need to be thinking about the next school year. Blount County is booming. People are wanting to come here. It's a beautiful place to be. So we need to make sure that we can accommodate those students that will soon enroll in our schools. Do we need new school buildings? Do we need new teachers? The one thing that is really concerning me is the third grade retention law. What are we going to do to address these particular deficiencies that we see with students? How are we going to meet the student-teacher ratio in that third grade if we were to retain all of those students? And you, like many other schools, would be retaining 50+% of their students in the third grade if that law passes. So these are questions that we need to ask, not about just today, but about the future. If we just plan for today, we'll become obsolete. We need to make sure that we have enough to replace technology that is becoming old. So those are the things. We need to bring together everybody. I've talked about the city officials. I've talked about you all, teachers, students, and definitely parents. So in order to make sure that the budget is correct, that we are allocating money in the most efficient manner, we would all come to the table and discuss where we need to go.
Question number 2. What steps would you take to ensure school funds were spent wisely and accounted for properly and in compliance with state and federal mandates?
When I think about federal and state mandates, my mind always goes to federal programs and special education. You know, those two are huge, and they have many laws, and there are many guidelines on how monies can be spent from Title II, Title III, Title I. We want to make sure that we have the evidence, and the schools have developed a school improvement plan that aligns with the way that they're asking for those monies to be spent. I think we do need to look at teacher usage on programs, not just classroom programs, but technology programs that they have. I would sit down and have a discussion with Mr. Herring and discuss those type of things on what is this program, how often is this program being used? You know, that's my biggest concern is you can spend $6,000 to $10,000 on one online platform program and 5 teachers are using it. Or you have one program that teachers are using, but maybe they're just using it for a specific amount of time. I don't think that utilization is good enough to spend that amount of money on. And would it be difficult to tell someone that when they've had that particular resource for multiple years, hey, we cannot renew this subscription? Yes, but after I tell them that, I say, how about you use this particular program? I'll get you the professional development on this so that you can use it efficiently. So that's how I want to make sure that our funds are being used. Again, going back to the leaky faucet. I want to make sure we're not losing money in areas where we can shift it and save money.
And now for the last question. Tell us about your most significant effort to obtain outside funding other than public funding for a project.
So on this particular question, I was thinking about the budgets that I've been responsible for. I've been responsible for Title I budget, coordinated school health budget, but those are all federally funded budgets. But I know one of the best grant writers in the state of Tennessee. And this particular person has built up our CTE program to a place that should be a model for other schools to come and visit so that they can increase their CTE program. She has made connections with industry corporations that have provided her with thousands of dollars. She knows her stuff. She is the best. So in answering this question, I personally have not had that experience, but I know how to recruit and hire someone that does. I know how to sit back and let somebody build up a program, seek out those grants, seek out that private funding to better our schools, to better our curriculum, and to bring additional CTE vocational courses to Blount County schools.
Thank you.
We're done. And we would like to ask you to hang around for a while and just kind of let the board get to know you. Good. It's not this stringent. If you can spare the time.
I can spare the time. Thank you.